Hi, welcome back. This is Joshua 2C. It's taken me 3 to get through this, just to do them in 30-minute increments and not make it as long. But we're going to start right into this. This part of Joshua 2 is Rahab's grafting in. It's the prophetic nature of God's story that was telling us through the prophets, all through the Old Testament, that the Gentile bride would be grafted into the story of Israel. And I just want to emphasize how important it is to see that the two spies came into Jericho to pull out Rahab and her family because they were part of the great and amazing story of having God's people take back the inheritance of God that was theirs from the beginning, a picture of the Garden of Eden. And how do they do it? Through the commander, the Lord of hosts, named Yeshua, right? Jesus in the Hebrew. So I'm actually going to want you to begin in Romans. We're going to go to Romans 11 and just look at these scriptures that if you're a believer, and if you've heard me say this before, then you know this part. Romans 1 through 8 is the doctrine of Christianity. If you're like, hey, what do we believe? How do I understand salvation, justification, sanctification, and finally glorification? How do I understand the 3-part salvation that God gave to us and designed for us to come back into relationship as fallen, sinful people with a holy, righteous, just oriented God, right? And so he gives Romans 1 through 8 is the doctrine. But 9, 10, and 11 turn the viewpoint back on Israel, if you will. If you think about the promised land and where we are in Joshua, and those that are standing east of the Jordan, looking into the land that has already been promised to them, but they have had 40 years of trial and testing, and an entire generation was killed off, was by God, allowed to die for their disobedience. And Romans 11 is going to explain that those branches were broken off for their disobedience. And yet they're looking in at the inheritance, and there are Gentiles in the land mixed in with giants, right? So the physical and the spiritual are there and being seen in Joshua. And Romans 9 to 11 goes, okay, so what now? What about Israel? Are they just finished? Are they disinherited? Does replacement theology reign now, meaning that the church replaced Israel? Or is there a deeper storyline here? And I believe that Paul is very clearly trying to tell us, hey, the remnant of Israel will absolutely be saved, and the remnant of the Gentiles will absolutely be saved. But just jump with me to Romans 11. If you haven't read it, I really recommend you to stop the video, read through it, ask your questions, and start understanding this really deep concept that God was explaining. And I'm going to start in verse 17. But if some of the branches were broken off, and you, although a wild olive shoot, were grafted in among the others, and now share in the nourishing root of the olive tree. Right there you could put the generation that passed away in their disobedience, broken off, right? Hebrews 3 and 4 says, does not enter the rest of Jesus because they would not submit to it. And the wild olive shoot just is us, right? But I also want you to put Rahab and her family in here so you understand the prophecy that is being played out in the physical in Joshua 2. Do not be arrogant toward the branches. If you are, remember, it is not you who support the root, but the root that supports you. Wow. Don't be arrogant. Then you will say, branches were broken off so that I could be grafted in. Well, clearly Israel rejected Christ. Or another one that I hear is Israel called the blood of Christ on them as a curse, so they are a cursed people. Right? I'm just going to say no. But do not be arrogant towards the branches. If you are, remember, it is not you who supports the root. The root supports you. Then you will say branches were broken off so that I could be grafted in. And that is true. They were broken off because of their unbelief, but you stand fast through faith. So do not become proud, but fear. And if you're like, fear what? It's work out your salvation with fear and trembling. The beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. That fear, okay? For if God did not spare the natural branches, neither will he spare you. Note then the kindness, that word kindness, underline it, and the severity of God. The tension of the kindness and the severity. The kindness is going to be seen in Rahab's story of the rescue, but the severity of judgment of the harem, right? The devoted to destruction that he's going to come in with when entire cities have to be wiped out. The kindness and the severity of God. Severity towards those who have fallen, but God's kindness to you, provided you continue in his kindness, meaning there is God's absolute sovereignty, and justification is a free gift. But I believe that the position of sanctification is work out your salvation with fear and trembling, not a works religion. You're already saved in justification, but really that continued journey of taking back the land and warring as Christ as the leader. Otherwise, you too will be cut off. I mean, he's being very clear, right? And even if they do not continue in their unbelief, if they do not continue in their, they'll be grafted back in. Okay, this is the promise of the remnant of Israel will come back, because they will, Matthew 23, Luke 13, like all of these prophecies, they will come back and they will bow before the Lord. For God has the power to graft them in again. For if they were cut from this by what is by nature a wild olive tree and grafted contrary to nature into a cultivated olive tree, right? This is what God is creating. How much more will these, the natural branches, be grafted back into their olive tree? All right. Talking about Israel rejection for the age of the 2,000 years, the age of the church. And then when they will come back in. Lest you be wise in your own sight, I do not want you to be unaware of this mystery. Paul will write of 7 mysteries in the New Testament, and this is one of those 7. A partial hardening has come upon Israel until, always mark until, because it's a timestamp that this is going to end, right? So until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. And in this way, all of Israel will be saved. So just stop. The fullness of the Gentiles, you need to underline it and recognize, hey, the fullness of the Gentiles is the age of the church, the age of the Spirit, and the age of Pentecost. All the same thing. Now, the time of the Gentiles is different. That is the time of the unbelievers of the Gentiles, Nebuchadnezzar through the Antichrist. But the fullness of the Gentiles is bringing in the fullness of the storehouse that Malachi speaks of, and the grafting in of the Gentile bride into what tree? The tree of Israel, right? And who is the root system? God himself is our Father. If you want to just look at just until moments for Israel, just look at 1944, Luke 1944, Luke 21:24, and Matthew 23:39. The promise that they will come back. And it says, in this way, all of Israel will be saved. The relationship of Ruth and Boaz created the baby that sat in Naomi's lap. Okay. So with this concept in mind, I want you to turn back to Joshua 2, and we're going to finish up the last part of this beautiful moment of Rahab being grafted into the victorious story of Israel when they are going to be able to receive the fullness of their inheritance of being the people of God. And Rahab and her family, just like Noah and his family, who also was not Jewish, right? He's a Gentile. It's before the Abrahamic covenant. They are saved, entirely saved from the judgment that comes down upon everyone around them. For why? Because she knows who God is, right? And so, and remember, I'm going to remind you in Hebrews 11 that it counted this as faith towards her for her actions, and she is listed among the greatest of the great. I mean, that should blow your mind. This list is really not long. And yet it says about her, by faith, Rahab the prostitute did not perish. Because of her faith, her belief in God, she did not come under the judgment that her entire world at that time was coming under, because Jericho is her known world. The land of Canaan was around that, and they all came under the judgment. But she did not perish with those who were disobedient, because she had given a friendly welcome to the spies. She had given the kindness to the spies, right? And the word there, like in the Hebrew that we're going to look at today, is chesed. It's the exact same word that just surrounds and drenches the story of Ruth. This kindness that extends past the law, right? And so if you are not Jewish, realize you are a partaker of God's kindness that is able and willing to extend. His hand is so great and mighty that he's willing to extend it past the law into the age of grace, the age of the church, and pouring out the Spirit throughout it. So let's just jump into this with understanding that this is a prophetic picture of Romans 11, of the incoming of the Gentile bride into the grafting in of Israel, but knowing as well that Israel is coming back. And y'all, I think it is soon. I think so many things are getting ready for this, and I look for them with great anticipation, because it says if their rejection meant this goodness to the world, how much more will their acceptance mean? And y'all, I believe that when the Jews return, that there's going to be fire in this world, because they are going to be some of the greatest evangelists ever known. And I believe that Paul is a prototype for the 144,000 that will come in Revelation 7. So here we are back in Joshua 2 with that understanding, and we are going to start in verse 12. Now then, this is the rooftop covenant. We're up on the roof, and Rahab is speaking to the two spies, the Regals, sorry, and she's told them what she knows, and now she's moving on. Now then, please swear to me by the Lord that I have dealt kindly with you. What is she known for in Hebrews 11? Her friendship, what she gave them. I have dealt kindly with you. So deal kindly with my father's house and give me a sure sign. The word kindly here is chesed. And she is going to include her entire family in this story. I love the picture of an envelope of grace. And I pray this over my own family. Yes, our covenant is individual in the sense that you have to make an individual decision, right? For God. But I think that we have lost the concept, the deep concept of families coming to Christ together, right? And this is kind of a throwback. She's going to say twice, hey, I gave you chesed, right? So I'm asking to receive chesed from you, this absolutely faithful kindness, right? That the Lord exhibits to us. And she said, ask for a sign. The word for sign is oath. Just turn with me to Genesis 1:14 for a minute. And this is the first time we ever get this word oath. And it says, and God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night. And let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. So the lights in the sky, the sun and the moon and the stars, they are created to be signs, which is oath. They're created to mark the days, yon. They're mark the years, and the seasons, moedim, right? So that is why they were put in the sky. And so this concept is that God created the earth with signs of the covenant promises of what he was going to do, right? It's so cool. Like, think about Noah's covenant, the Noahic covenant. What is the sign that is cut there? And I would say, it's the rainbow. And originally, remember that word does not mean rainbow as in a colorful, beautiful thing. It was a bow, like a war bow. And we also know that rainbow, that sign, that we only see half of it. I believe the other half of it, when you look at scripture, is from the book of Revelation, sits around the throne of God, right? So the sign that we see, the other half of that sucker sits over the throne of God. And it's just a remarkable reminder that God is holding these covenants to this day. The Noahic covenant still stands. How do we know? Because you haven't flooded, right? The world has not been flooded out so that the entire world came under judgment. There is local floods, but there are not, the entire world is covered, right? So he's still honoring that. Even the covenant, anyhow, I get way too off. Abrahamic covenant, had circumcision. Mosaic covenant also had circumcision and the law. But so you're going to get different things, but always having the sign. So watch for the sign, right? It's like that old song when I was little at Easter. It was called Watch the Lamb. And I still like to go back and listen to it about the little boys, Daddy, Daddy, what did we do wrong? And it's saying, we're scared and a lot's happening here in Jerusalem today. And the father says, watch the lamb, and it just always really gets me because the father's telling those boys, like, watch the lamb as he's going to Calvary, because that is the sign. That is the true Passover. And so even Passover, where the sign was the lamb, was a prototype, a prophecy of Jesus Christ, the lamb. And so the sign, watch for the sign in this story as this covenant is going to be cut, because she is asking for a covenant. That you will save alive my father and my mother, my brothers and my sisters, and all who belong to them, and deliver our lives from death, not Saul. It means to snatch away, to pull really quickly and save. She's asking for that. Snatch us away from the death that we know is inevitable and is coming. And so you get this picture right here of her asking for her entire household, which is just like Noah, right? We've seen this with Noah. When Noah was all 8 of them got on the boat, and actually 2 Peter 3 will refer back to that again, that all 8 were saved. The household was saved, and she is asking for that. And the men said to her, our life for yours, even unto death. They are making a covenant with her, an agreement with her, and she is going to be grafted into Israel's salvation now. And so, and they're putting their life down for it. Don't miss this. Our life for yours, even to death. It's a beautiful picture of Jesus, right? Going to save the bride. If you do not tell this business of ours, then the Lord gives us a land. We will deal kindly and faithfully with you. So the word kindly here, again, is hesed, and faithfully is emet, and the word is true. We will honor this, and if we do not, I will lay my life down for you, right, in this. Then she let them down by a rope through the window, for her house was built into the city wall, so that she lived in the wall. The word wall here is chama. And it's really interesting because you'll see Paul being let down by a basket through a rope. You'll see several different things like that.